Back in the 90s, when the only people who'd heard of Miley Cyrus were her parents, there was a thriving freeware and shareware market on the Amiga. Yes, the Amiga. Deal with it. One developer, James Daniels, released a handful of games under the name Apex Designs, including a multiplayer Tetris clone called Sixtris and Frontal Assault, a Scorched Earth clone. Well, that was a dumb move. Frontal Assault was a personal favourite of mine, and I would invite far too many friends over to my place after school to crowd around my Amiga 1200 and blow the shit out of each other. But we're not here to look at a bunch of freeware games, oh no, we're here to look at Apex Design's very first commercial release, Payback, a technically impressive Grand Theft Auto clone developed for the Amiga. This game may not look like much by today's standards, or indeed the standards of 2001 when the game was released, but James Daniels squeezed every last ounce of power out of that machine to produce something that not only looked like Grand Theft Auto, but in his own words, beats GTA in every way. Except in sales, obviously. Now, 2 years later the game would be ported to the Mac, and then a few years after that it would be ported to the GP2X, a Linux-based open source handheld owned by exactly 9 people, and then eventually it would be ported to iOS devices, the iPad, the iPhone, which are owned by millions and millions and millions of people. But before that happened, in 2004, the game was ported to the Game Boy Advance. Ownership of that one falls somewhere in between the two. So let's talk about Payback then, because it's more than just a third-rate Grand Theft Auto clone. It is in fact a third-rate Grand Theft Auto clone set in a bizarre version of America conceived of by someone whose only experience of America comes from movies and the news, where flash white and blue cop cars drive on the left side of the road and mafia types tell you to get your bloody arse in gear. There are 3 main cities in the single-player mode, each with 2 sets of missions to complete. It's very much a British take on American crime, which includes the sort of missions that don't really make much sense if you think about them for more than 7 seconds. One mission has your mob boss sending you out to kill the attendees of a Ku Klux Klan rally for no reason other than he thinks they're racist bastards. Apparently the mission where you burn an effigy of a Klansman burning a cross on someone's front lawn, on their front lawn, was deleted from the game, citing the fact that it doesn't exist. But that's not what's impressive about this game. No, the impressive thing, and you might have noticed it already, is that this is a Game Boy Advance game rendered entirely in 3D. Everything in this game is being rendered in real time. It's not perfect, there's texture tearing and significant slowdown during events such as explosions, but it's pretty bloody impressive. Of course, by 2004 there were already rudimentary tech demos of 3D on the Game Boy Advance, including a section from Resident Evil 2 and a partial port of Quake, which I'm told was pretty decent, but there weren't any games that actually made it to retail that rendered 3D on the Advance. Payback was one of the first. I mean, probably, I'm not going to research that or anything. Yes, alright, 3D graphics may not seem that exciting. By 2004, 3D graphics were the well-established norm, but at that time we were still a year away from 3D-capable handheld consoles like the Nintendo DS or the PSP. All we had was the Game Boy Advance, which wasn't even designed with 3D in mind at all. The fact that Apex Designs managed to get the thing to do this is nothing short of astounding. Of course, by 2004, Grand Theft Auto had firmly established itself as an industry heavyweight, with not 1, but 3 new sequels, GTA 3, Vice City and San Andreas, which dropped for the PS2, PC and the Xbox, so there may not have been much hunger for the old school top-down approach to the genre. Oh, and there's the little matter of an actual Grand Theft Auto game for the Game Boy Advance that came out literally 1 month before Payback came out. Yes, the release of a proper Grand Theft Auto game for the same system just a few short weeks beforehand may have deflated Payback's tires a little bit, but while it didn't have the brand recognition of the game that inspired it, Payback did have, you know, I mean, technically, yes, it's not great. One of the biggest problems of rendering real-time 3D on the Game Boy Advance is that the screen is too small. The system simply lacks the pixel depth to really make out the finer details, which means that to be able to see your character or the car you're driving, the camera has to be closer to the player. Too close to the player to allow you to see as much of your surroundings as you can see on the Amiga version. GTA Advance tries to get around this problem by actively zooming out when you're in a vehicle, a technique that would work if the game's camera were any good at following the player, or if your view of your vehicle weren't blocked by caps lock bold-faced text every 17 seconds. So Payback is technically impressive, but it's just misplaced on the Game Boy Advance. It's actually much more at home on iOS devices like the iPhone and the iPad, where it's since been joined by a sequel with a rather clever title, don't think you'll see it coming, Payback 2. So that's nice. 16 missed calls. Oof. Nevertheless, it's an effort that should absolutely be commended. Payback really shows off what the dinky hardware of the Game Boy Advance is capable of. That doesn't make it a good game, of course, I mean you can barely see what you're doing, but it's a game you can look at and say, wow, look what they did. Of course, a proper bona fide Grand Theft Auto handheld title will come out the following year when Rockstar released Liberty City Stories for the PSP, and then we'd have Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars for the Nintendo DS in 2009, another attempt at doing a top-down style Grand Theft Auto title, this time interestingly with a camera system very similar to Payback's. So, there we are. Bye. Just so you guys know, in 2 weeks' time we are doing a corrections episode, errata correction, stuff that we forgot to mention in previous episodes. We will be doing that for our season finale. That episode will be going up the week of Christmas, that Friday. If you've spotted a mistake or something that we may have left out of an episode, or if there's anything that you think we got wrong, shoot me an email. The email address will appear underneath here, and we will make sure that that is included in the finale, and you'll also get a thank you credit for providing us the relevant information. Thanks for watching. I will see you next week. Why am I doing that? That was dumb.